Monday, February 7th, 2022. And pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16th, 2021 order extending certain provisions of the open meeting law under Chapter 30A, Section 18, to allow for remote meeting participation until April 1st of 2022. This February 7th, 2022 meeting, select board meeting is being conducted via remote participation by the board and is, of course, is being recorded by Westwood Media Center with our consent. First up this evening on the chair's update, we have a couple of things for you. The Dedham Westwood Water District on February 1st, just a week ago, the Dedham Westwood Water District announced that the district has achieved compliance and is no longer in violation of the Tier 2 Massachusetts drinking water regulation. You may recall you got notice before on that. Per the Dedham Westwood Water District, their team executed a plan to reduce the local running and annual average for TTHM in the public drinking supply, and that included flushing the water distribution system, blending the water with MWRA, and continually sampling and monitoring the levels of the TTHM in the water to ensure actions have been taken and having an impact to protect the public and the safety. So they are in full compliance, and you can check out if you have looking for further details on the town's website. You'll be able to click a link to be able to get more information about that. Next, we are still looking for nominations for the John J. Cronin Public Service Award. The nominations will be open for a while. This award is named after the late John J. Cronin, who was town treasurer for many years and selflessly gave of his time and for the betterment of the community, both as an elected official and in numerous volunteer activities within and with outside the community. Past recipients include Bob Delisle of 2021, Stephen Rafsky in 2020, Michael Cronin in 2019, our town council, Mr. Patrick Ahern in 2018, and Mr. James Gavin, town treasurer, back in 2017. Nomination forms are available on the town's website, and you can contact the select board office to have one sent to you. All nominations will be submitted to the select board office at Town Hall. The award will be presented at the spring town meeting. At the annual town meeting, please contact the select board office. All nominations are due by March 7th, 2022. So just about 1 month from today, but don't wait because then you'll forget about it. We do have one last thing. We are asked by the Westwood Fire Department to remind everyone, not only the fire department, the police department, the Department of Public Works, they do not test the ice thickness in ponds in town and to certify that the ice surface is safe for skating. So anyone skating on town ponds is doing so at their own risk, and the town does not certify that the ice is safe for skating or any other activities. So please use caution and understand that we are not testing how thick the ice is for you to be skating on it. And with that, Mr. Coleman, I understand you have something else you'd like to add this evening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of our town clerk, Dottie Powers, we have received some inquiries regarding the town census. The annual town census should be arriving in your mailboxes within the next few weeks. There was a delay due to the adjustment to precinct lines as a result of the 2020 federal census. Your precinct number will not be noted, will be noted on the census form when you receive it. However, in early April, a separate mailing will be sent to all voters who will have a change to their polling location. Just want to make sure that people understand that that's the reason for the delay, and to remind people to be sure to complete and sign the census and form and return it in 10 days of receipt, either by U.S. postal mail in the envelope provided or via email at census@townhall.westwood.ma.us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, in case anyone's waiting for that census by the mailbox. So,
they are inquiring. Let's just put it that way. We're very concerned.
Right. Then now they know. All right, scheduled action. Let's move along. We have draft MBTA compliance guidelines for multifamily zoning districts, and we're joined by Nora and we're joined by Abby. Alan Rollins is also here from the planning board. Anyone else from the planning board, Tish, that we're letting in? Not yet.
I have Kate Wynn.
Okay, and Kate's coming in as well. All right, so Nora, Abby, who's taking the lead on this one?
Abby will take the lead on this.
Okay. So
All
Abby,
right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a few slides, if you don't mind. Can I share my screen? We're here tonight to let you know about a new law or amendments to the State Zoning Act. The State Zoning Enabling Law was signed about a year ago, January 2021. There were some major amendments related to housing, and the intent was to promote more multifamily housing across the state, or really across the region. There was also specific amendments in this law that required specific requirements for all MBTA communities. That's 175 communities where there is MBTA service, so train stations, bus stops, and ferry service as well. This new law, again, the law, there's amendments to the state law. It does several things to make housing production easier, with the voting amendment process change with the town meeting zoning amendment process, also with specific projects. But what we're focused on tonight, and what the Westwood Planning Board has been focused on, there's specific requirements because Westwood is, has MBTA, has train station and bus stops. There in this law, it says that all communities must adopt at least one zoning district of a reasonable size. The minimum gross density that we allow for in the new zoning district has to allow a minimum of 15 units per acre. It has to be substantially within a half mile of a train station or bus stop. It also has to be suitable for families with children. So that means there can't be any bedroom or age restrictions imposed by our zoning. And then the permit approval process, that's our local process that, usually we have, requirements in the zoning outlining exactly what that steps for approval is with the planning board. It cannot be discretionary. So the law went into effect early 2021, but the draft guidelines released by the state were mid-December. In those guidelines, we've circulated them. You had a copy of the guidelines in your packet. They are accepting public comments by the end of March. So during this time, anyone, various towns and stakeholders can submit public comments to the state by the end of March. And then they expect they'll be finalizing their guidelines later in the year. They didn't say exactly when, but it's expected summer 22. The guidelines also detailed further some of these, some of the terms that were outlined in the legislation that we weren't clear on when we first heard about the law. The planning board began working on it. One of the things is they defined what a reasonable size is for a zoning district. In these guidelines, in the draft guidelines, they say there's a formula approach. It's based on acreage, and also there's a unit capacity based on how many, what your current housing stock is based on the most recent census. For Westwood, it says, or has to be at least 50 total acres. And then for Westwood, Westwood has been designated by the state as a bus service community, which requires the total housing stock in this, or 20% of our total housing stock is based on the census number. So 20% of the 5,800 units that Westwood has, that comes to 1,160 total unit capacity. So then if we just straight divided that number by 15 units per acre, that's the minimum the law says that we have to zone for. So if we do 15 units per acre, that comes out to a total of 77 acres that the new zoning district has to, that's the minimum size in the draft guidelines right now. Westwood Planning Board has currently put forward a zoning amendment. They are looking at this new overlay district. Right now, the zoning is over, this new overlay district is over the 22 Everett Street property that is commonly referred to as the Foster Block or the Tumble Bus site. And then also 2 properties at University Station, where we already have that density of housing. That would be the Gables residential residential apartment building that is currently 15 units per acre. Also, the University Place condos built by Pulte Homes. There's 100 condos there that also qualifies and meets the density requirement. So right now, the planning board's proposal doesn't, it's a start. It doesn't meet the full minimum, 50 to 77 acres that are outlined in the draft guidelines currently. But the planning board right now is proposing this overlay. They realize that they want to submit comments to the state before the end of March. And then when the guidelines are finalized later this year, they have an understanding that we'll take a look at that and to comply in the future. After the guidelines are finalized, we may have to come back with a future zoning amendment. So the main reason we're here tonight is to hear from you as part of the interim compliance. The state has said that if we submit this an informational form by May 2nd, also an action plan to bring the community into compliance, that is due to them before the end of the year. If we do those two things, we'll remain eligible to receive grants, but we do have to comply by the end of 2023, according to the draft guidelines. So right now we're here tonight to inform you of this new law. We wanted to summarize these draft guidelines and then hear from any comments from you. If you have any initial comments tonight or at a future meeting, the planning board is working on submitting draft comments that we'd like to compile so that we can submit those in March to make sure the state has it during the public comment period due March 31st.
Okay, thank you, Abby. So I guess there's a lot of information to take in, and it hasn't really been discussed all that much even at the state level yet, although MMA I think is taking it on coming up to have more comments. But so how many more acres do we really need to comply? We need another 20 acres?
No, we need a lot more than that. We only have about 16 total right now.
16?
Yeah.
Okay, and the minimum for us is 58?
Right now, because they consider us a busing community,
Yes.
even though we have 2 rail stations, and if you look at the definition, a bus community is a community that only has bus stations. We are going to be required to have closer to 77 acres if that holds true.
Okay. And do we even, I don't think we even have that available, do we, without, I don't know.
Well, certainly there's not 77 open acres
Okay.
in
Right.
Westwood, other than what we've designated for open space and put in conservation. So that's not something we can get to, but no, we don't have 77 acres just hanging out, waiting to be developed for multi-housing family housing. Pardon me.
So how does, I guess the first question is, how do they expect some communities to be able to comply with this,
Well, so these are guidelines right now.
Right.
And I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think MMA is going to push back. I know that MMLA, Mass Municipal Lawyers Association, is having a seminar, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, I believe it is, that I've registered for. I think you're going to see significant pushback by a lot of interested parties, just on the acreage requirement alone.
Right. It's almost impossible in a small town like ours to be able to comply, but especially where we have other natural resources that some other communities don't have that we're able to keep as a natural resource. So,
right.
Particularly hail that's going on right now. So that, that's further pushback that we'll have to comply with. So who is going to be responsible for drafting the information to the state? Is that the planning board?
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the select board draft a correspondence to the state as well as the planning board. And I'll volunteer to help draft yours. And I'll work with Abby and Nora and the planning board people to do it so that they look remarkably similar.
Okay. Then you're hired. And then we'll look to see, like I said, I'm willing to help, from MMA and let you know what comes out of that as well. And I know that's it's something that's been on the radar since it's been passed. So we'll have to see how that goes. Okay, then I guess, thank you. And I guess to be continued.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a minute to commend Nora and Abby and the planning board for the hard work they've put in on this already. They've really done a lot of legwork and it's helped.
Excellent. Yes, thank you very much. We do appreciate all the hard work from other committees in town, especially led by Nora and Abby. So thank you very much. I guess we'll have you back after Mr. Hearn gets a draft and see that the two committees are on in sync.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
before Abby
Yes.
leaves, or this is really more directed to town council. What do we do about getting the correction on the town designation of bus versus train? I mean, that seems like a giant miss on their part. And
If you read the definition, they're just violating their own definition in the guidelines. I think that's something that has to go in both of our letters saying, we are a commuter rail community. We have 2 commuter rail stations here. And we have a third within a half a mile of our border at the Dedham train station. So I don't see how they call us a bus community, but.
And does that make it better or worse if we become a train?
Well, I guess that's my concern is, I mean, I don't want to, go to war over that issue when we're never going to get to 58 acres.
So the document itself from DHCD has a couple of internal inconsistencies. That's one of them, where it defines what is a bus community, what's a commuter rail community, but then it attaches a map and a listing and lists us in an inappropriate way compared with their definitions. But they also have an inconsistency in how they define reasonable size. So in one section, it says a reasonable size is not less than 50 acres. But on the very next page, it says reasonable size is a relative rather than absolute determination. Because of the diversity of MBTA communities, a multifamily district that is reasonable in one city or town may not be reasonable in another city or town. Objective differences in community characteristics must be considered in determining what is reasonable for each community. So that's exactly what the section that we want to go back to them with and say 50 acres is not reasonable in our community.
That's
Sounds like a lot of discretionary legal talk.
But the only way you would get to 50 acres is take existing single family zoning and make it multifamily as of right.
Which is DHCD's intent. That's what they're looking to have suburban communities do. And that's not something that I think we're looking to do. We're looking to take land that's either not fully used to its potential or vacant and have that zone for multifamily.
And town meeting will have to approve any of this anyway.
But it's different at town meeting. Normally for a zoning change, you need 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
They were somewhat wise passing this legislation as a simple majority.
Yeah, they reduced it from the 2/3 to a simple majority.
For this one, yeah.
And to that end, the planning board has a warrant article that is just the 16 currently. And I would echo, I've watched several of the meetings. I would echo your compliments, Pat, to Chairman Paff and the rest of the planning board and the way they've handled this. I think that, the warrant article as it's being advanced is about as far as we should go at this point in time.
Right.
Anybody, anything else? No? John, Rob, good?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to our planning board for attending. We in for our budget update. Ms. Dukeman, you're on again.
Thank you. Just a quick update tonight. We continue to move along in the budget process. Over this last week, we have printed up and completed our budget documents, both the municipal budget book and then the overall budget book, which contains all of the information on all of the operating budget, capital budget expenditures, proposed revenue, et cetera, all in one document. Those are all on the town's website and have been distributed out to all of our officials and department heads and the Finance and Warrant Commission. We do go tomorrow night to the FinCom and make a presentation on the budget. We'll go through both the municipal budget presentation that the board has seen and the overall budget presentation to give them an idea of where the budget is at this point in time. And those presentations are on our website too. I do just want to quickly mention, we've had some feedback that sometimes some of the presentations we've done at the select board's meeting, depending on how people are watching the meeting, whether live or recorded, might be hard for them to see. And I just want to make sure people know any presentation we do with you, we do put on our website. So everything is there for people to go and look at. And I just wanted to share just one slide on state aid, because we did have an update on that since your last meeting. Oops. Sorry about that. Can you see that? I know it's a little,
Yes.
little messy, but just the governor's budget did come out, and that's the number that we've put into our budget at this point for FY23 state aid, projected $6.9 million, shown in green. A relatively moderate increase from the year before, which was the current year, 6.6 million. So state aid is about 6% of our overall budget. I do have the table on the bottom shows the categories of that 6.9 million. Most of our money, 6 million in FY23, comes in Chapter 70, the education money. That is scheduled to increase by 283,000 or 4.9%. And then the second major category is municipal unrestricted aid in the old days, which was called the lottery money. So kind of unrestricted funding, FY23, $823,000, just a small $21,000 increase or 2.7%. That was something we had talked about, I think, at your last meeting, that there's some pressure about that's just too small an increase, 2.7%, given where the state's revenue has been. Also, in talking about the state aid with the superintendent and the school folks, they have indicated that this 4.9% increase in the Chapter 70 does reflect a little bit of advancement on the Chapter 70 formula that the state has been trying to make the last couple of years. But some communities are really benefiting from that and are seeing significantly higher increases. So if people hear that or see news on that statewide or other communities, that is not Westwood. This is a relatively minor increase for us. Again, some communities might see a larger increase. We do on our state charges right now, we have $119,000 or a 16% increase on the charges. That's a little bit higher than it's been in previous years. We do have a school choice charge running through there. So we just want to look into that a little bit more and make sure that that is correct, that information on the charges. So again, this information has been incorporated into the budget and is necessary to balance out the budget that we're putting forth.
Okay.
And that's really it. So tomorrow night, we'll go through this with the Finance and Warrant Commission, the municipal budget, the school will present the school budget, and then we do the overall budget. And this really gets all the information out to them as they start their review process over the next 2 months.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Any questions, John, Rob?
Just got just one on that state charges one, Pam. Is that something that's something that is discretionary at the state level? Is that something that's driven by activity from within the town? What drives that? Because, you know, nice to see a almost 5% increase to the school line item, but, you know, being offset by a 16% rise in offsetting charges is like, that's not sustainable math.
Yeah, no, the charges is driven by our activity, and we're just trying to clarify what that is so we'd be able to look into that and explain that to you. And I will mention with the charges, it's estimates, and then what you're actually charged during the year is based on what actually occurs. So we just want to see where that is coming from. It's certainly a much higher increase than we normally have at this point in the year. Normally we see the whole category of charges go up about 3 to 5%. So this is a little bit more than that. So we're going to follow up on that and then let you know at the upcoming meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pam. All right. Thank you, Pam. We'll see you again tomorrow night.
Thank
All right. So moving along our agenda, we have our 2022 annual town meeting article discussion. Vote to amend, to accept, or to remove any articles. I don't really see much changing since our last meeting. Chris, would you agree with that?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. But we still have a couple of things in the works, but nothing to be able to bring forward that I'm aware of at this time. So we still have plenty of placeholders. We have 10, but we're waiting to see how those fall into place. Nothing has really happened yet that we can remove anything yet would be my recommendation. Would you agree, Chris?
Yes.
Leave it as is for now until bring it up again at our next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So moving along then, we have our, if I'm not missing anything, our Pond Street, Clapboardtree Street traffic study. You may recall from our last meeting that this was on our agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the board asked us to come back with some additional information. Also have one clarification question that we'd like to ask you. So, but for the time being, we do have Chief Silva, we do have Liz Altman from TEC, our consultant here. I'm going to turn it over to Liz so she can provide you with the presentation.
Thank you. All right, Liz, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you for having me back. I did have just a couple of clarifications for some items the board had questions on. I will just share my screen briefly. The board had asked where we were considering, or where I recommended us placing new speed limit signs on Pond Street in accordance with the existing MassDOT regulation. So as you can see, this is south on the left, north on the right, in order to get it on one sheet. And the blue lines are where the regulation is for 30 miles an hour. And the orange line is where the regulation is for 35. So our recommendation is to add 3 new signs, a new 30-mile-an-hour sign just a little south of Clapboardtree Street, and a new 35-mile-an-hour sign right in the vicinity of Greenacre Road, and a new 35-mile-an-hour sign just north of Lakeshore Drive. Then we would relocate the 35-mile-an-hour sign that's going northbound to approximately 232 Pond Street. And what that does is lengthen the effective area of the 30-mile-an-hour speed regulation to make sure people really get around that curve safely. And relocate this 30-mile-an-hour sign closer to where the actual regulation is. So that is my recommendation for what we should do at this point to ensure that the public understands what the speed limits are on Pond Street.
Elizabeth, if the long-term goal is to make the entire roadway 30 miles an hour, what is that process time-wise look like? I guess I'm getting why would we manipulate all of these signs if our long-term intent is to make it all 30?
Because what MassDOT requires, they have quite a procedure for requesting a new speed limit regulation or a modification to a speed limit. And what they want you to do first off is make sure that your speed limit signs match the existing regulation. So if for some reason the town had put up incorrect signs that weren't in conformance with the speed regulation, or if a road didn't have a speed regulation and it had speed limit signs on it, they want everything to be legit. And then that's when you do the data collection. So this would be the first step. It's not expensive to do this, but it really brings the town in conformance in order so our data collection is in the proper format.
And then what typically is the timeline, your study and the application to the state?
It will take a little while to do all the data collection. I have a slide at the end that I can show
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. I didn't know when we were going to talk about this. I have a couple other items. The data required are trial runs, speed data collection by radar, crash data with actual crash reports from the police department, and we map the physical roadway conditions. So that takes, a couple, 2-3 weeks to get all that information together. Then we would establish the speed zones and speed ranges. And then what we would want to do is come back to the board and say, this is what I recommend you should do, either yes or no to apply for the 30 mile an hour. Whether or not I thought you could actually get that through MassDOT. I think you have, like I said before, I think you've got a good chance, but just in case the data collection doesn't prove that out, we'd want to bring that to the board. Then we would create a report officially if that's the way the board wanted to go. And then MassDOT usually takes 3 to 4, sometimes 5 weeks to make a recommendation back to the town. And then the board says, this, I want to enact this regulation, and then it goes in your speed regulations, and then it's enforceable.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Clarifying question for you, Liz. The last time you presented a number of options, and I thought one of the options was advisory speed limit signs, which are the orange ones as opposed to the regulatory, which are the black and white. Do I remember that correctly?
That was on Clapboardtree Street.
Okay, could that not also be applied to Pond Street though, in order to, there's a pretty good curve in the road there right at Oak Street, and could that advisory speed not be a solution to help calm traffic measures a little bit?
I think it probably could. I'd want to go out there. There's such a thing, it's called like a ball bearing test. So basically you go at the speed limit and you see where the ball bearing goes on as you're on your centripetal force or whatever around the corner. And if that goes too far out of the way, you'd say definitely this needs to be 5 miles an hour slower. But that is something that we would take into consideration when doing all the data collection for the speed limit change. We would do that ball bearing test.
Okay.
Liz, a question for you is there any information available as to, I don't know, how many applications have been to reduce the speed and actually receive the reduction versus increasing it?
Again, if you don't, when we collect the data and we say it's not going to be, it would be an increase instead of a decrease, we just recommend that you don't make that application. But we did one in Saugus not that long ago where it had a similar situation, a very changeable speed limit, and MassDOT approved the change down to the consistent 30 mile an hour speed limit. Okay. So I think if the data is there, you can make the case to MassDOT.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Chris.
So Liz, if you could just briefly explain when a community submits a request to reduce the speed to MassDOT, some people may think, oh, that should be an automatic approval. Can you just briefly go over so the select board members as well as the residents who are watching understand that just because you're submitting a request to reduce speed does not mean it's always going to be guaranteed or approved?
Exactly. It is a request. If the state reviewers have questions, they could come back and ask for more data or a different, make sure that we're interpreting the data correctly. They could come back and say, we don't agree. You need to keep it at the existing regulation. And then that's what happens. Then you just could you just maintain the regulation the way it is and keep the speed limit signs where they are.
So Liz, let me just ask you one other question. So coming down, I guess, from east to west, right?
Mhm.
Coming out just the 30-mile-an-hour zone after the yellow, after the orange or yellow. It's the 30 miles already in the 30-mile-an-hour zone. Wouldn't you be like pushing it back so that people know to slow down before they get to the zone, or no? Am I being too picky?
That one, you could move it, but it's like 100 feet or something like that. So it's not, it's far enough that people are turning off of High Street, either north or south, either end. They turn off, they see the speed limit sign. I think if you pushed it too much closer to High Street, people wouldn't register it.
No, I'm thinking the one farther down. I'm sorry. The second one coming down that way, 30, 35, and then the next 30. See how it's already in the zone before
Yes.
it gets to the curve? Yeah, that's the one right
Mhm.
there.
Yeah,
You would want to push it up farther because it's going into the curve.
you could. It's we could probably move it again opposite 232 Pond Street. I was just trying to limit the number of signs that DPW is going to be moving. But that's certainly something that we can do.
It just seems to
Move
me
it
like
like,
you'd want to slow down before you get into the curve and not figure out after you're already in it.
mhm. Could go 0.2 of a mile up here in
Yeah,
this location.
DPW doesn't mind. Okay.
So that's my recommendation on that. The next thing the board had a question on was just the information about crashes. I believe the chair had a question. This is just pulled from MassDOT's website. This is not a detailed crash analysis. There are 37 total in the past 5 years. You can see they're mostly located at the ends, but there are a significant number at Clapboardtree Street and Oak Street. A significant data point is 13 single vehicles crashes. Those occur, there's 50% of the crashes around Clapboardtree Street are single vehicle, as well as at Oak, maybe indicating that speed could be an issue through these curves. Angled crashes are at the intersections. Rear end crashes, there are some here at Clapboardtree Street and then up again at the far end. So
Can you add a little more clarity on what a single vehicle crash is?
it means somebody it's somebody who's going too fast, or there's snow or it's slick, and they're not hitting another vehicle, but they're creating significant damage to their own vehicle. Either they're hitting a tree or a utility pole, mailbox, something like that, but it is creating a significant damage to their vehicle, enough that it goes to the state.
And at an average of 9 vehicular crashes on that stretch, does that feel outside the norm, average? That seems really high to me.
It is a significant number of single vehicle crashes. It does indicate to me either there's some visibility issues or some kind of geometry that we would want to look at that would probably help the case for slowing people down.
And I know you can't do it, but I'm looking at my past slide, and that really is during the entire 35-mile-an-hour zone area.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's over this is the 35-mile-an-hour zone here, and then along here.
Mr. Chair, is Chief Silva able to add any color commentary since there were 13 single vehicle and there seems to be 12 between Clapboardtree and Oak Street, if speed was a factor in those?
So I don't know that speed was a factor, but without looking at each individual report, but you can almost guarantee that it was. Otherwise, to state the obvious, the vehicle would have stopped on the control. I mean, we just don't have enough bad weather, the outside conditions notwithstanding, to justify a vehicle that's sliding on ice and hitting a wall, right? It's somebody coming up to a perpendicular intersection and not realizing it, and then they veer at the last minute, or they underestimate the ability to navigate the vehicle. So almost certainly it is. And with the two curvatures in the road at where right now in this graphic, you see the 4 and the 8, and that's within, you know, the 35 zone. I mean, there's just no question in my mind. I think we'll be able to put together a lot of data and a lot of, you know, testimony to buttress the packet that the board will see to make the decision if we submit it or not. But I can't speak to those individual accidents now, but almost certainly intuitively that would be the case.
Thanks, Chief.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? John, we have two things to
Yeah.
do. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Liz. You had something else, Liz?
The last thing was the board asked about the school zone in front of Xavier and Brothers. It meets all of MassDOT's requirements for a school zone. So I can work with DPW and the police department as to where the signs would exactly go. But if the board would like, it does meet all the qualifications for a school zone.
And Liz, does the school zone include like the baseball field and the tennis courts? Is that included in it?
It's usually within 300 feet of the building itself. So it would probably start somewhere around the driveway.
Yeah.
It doesn't usually include the fields.
Okay.
It would, well, it might on this side include the, we want it in front of that crosswalk that's existing. So it would probably start here at the tennis courts and then right in the vicinity of the driveway.
And Liz, I think when we had our internal meeting, Chief Silva raised this. We could have advisory or warning signs further back on the roads. I believe that's correct. All right.
Yes, yes, we would definitely work with the police department on where the safest location for those signs are.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready, Michael?
I am, John, I think. Rob, you ready? Okay. Okay.
Okay, I move that the select board authorize the town administrator in conjunction with public safety and public works to proceed with the appropriate additional traffic analysis as required by MassDOT to change the regulatory speed limit along the entirety of Pond Street. The additional traffic analysis will be presented for select board review and for consideration of submission to MassDOT at a future select board meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I further move that the board authorize the town administrator in conjunction with public safety and public works to proceed with the appropriate analysis to construct a school zone in front of Xavier Brothers High School at 800 Clapboardtree Street.
And I will second that as well.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay, thank you very
Mr.
much,
Chair.
Liz.
Yes,
Thank
Mr. Chair, before we have Liz leave, and I don't know, is Chris, is Todd on tonight or no?
No, Todd, they had a personal conflict this evening.
Okay, just one thing, last time we approved converting the yield signs into stop signs coming to and from Clabber to Pond and Pond to Clabber. Just clarification, I think I asked this last time, but I don't remember whether or not we got a complete answer. Would that make then those islands fill in between where the channel is currently, that a yield, and make that a four-way sort of 90-degree angle stop on all sides? I felt like I asked that question, but I can't remember what the answer was to that.
I think that's next issue. Sorry.
No, it would still remain a T intersection, but you're just stopping instead of the free flow rights. They would change to a stop sign. So the stop on, for example, the stop sign, if you're going north on Pond Street and making that right onto Clapboardtree Street, that would be a stop sign instead of the free flow right. But the people coming the other way on Pond Street still have to stop on Pond Street. So hope that makes sense without a diagram. You wouldn't add any other stop signs except where the yield signs are currently. I
was more asking of, would that sort of angular cutoff go away, and so that all the traffic has to come to the 90-90? That was the question.
Oh, not in this current iteration, that would be a bigger construction project to remove the channelized right turns and make it a standard T.
Okay.
That came from the planning board today too, as well. I mean, from pedestrian and bike committee put that to us today in a memo as well. But yeah, I don't think that was part of our scope right now, Rob, but I think that that's definitely on the table for the future to, when we redesign that intersection, to take that, call it slide off to the right off the board.
Yep. Okay.
Which gets us to the next thing on our agenda. It's a good segue, Rob. Thank you. Traffic rules and orders amendment for Pond Street and Clapboardtree yield to stop signs. So we discussed this last time. And I think Rob, you may have just took it all already. So move right along. But we are going to change the yield sign west by the channelized right turn from Clapboardtree onto Pond. And that's going to become a stop sign. And then the yield sign, which right now from Pond Street onto Clapboardtree, which would be to take the right to go in front of the temple, that's going to become a stop sign. So those two yield signs will become stop signs in their own isolated stop sign. And eventually, I hear what you're saying, we'll reconfigure that intersection to take the, if you will, the slide out and just make everyone go up to the top of the intersection and then turn. It definitely will be another slowdown for speed as well and keep traffic from flowing a lot faster. But that'll be on the table, but it's not before us tonight. So that's what we're looking at. So did we don't need to take any action on that? Is that right?
No, I think you do.
We did take action? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
You ready?
I mean, yes, go ahead, John.
I move the board approve the amendments to the traffic rules and orders, specifically to Schedule 03, isolated stop signs, and Schedule 04, yield signs, to reflect the following actions and publish these amendments on the town website and in a newspaper of local circulation of the general public. 1, remove the yield sign on the westbound channelized right turn from Clapboardtree Street onto Pond Street and replace that with a stop sign. And 2, remove the yield sign at the traffic channelized right turn from Pond Street onto Clapboardtree Street, replace with a stop sign.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Elizabeth, I have a question for you, or Liz. So I know, we talk about speed bumps all the time and how you can't put them on streets, that I guess my question is, why can't they put them where a stop sign is? So that people who blow through a stop sign actually hit a bump instead of, slowing, you know what I'm saying? I don't understand why they can't put them there if you're required to, by law, to stop, except for fire apparatus. And I understand that, but they can make them wider so that cars hit them and fire engines do not.
Speed humps are generally used as traffic calming devices. So they're made so they're wide enough that people can go 20, 25 miles an hour over them. And so they're not used to reinforce stop signs in that manner because they're not a traffic control device like a stop sign or a yield sign is. They're a traffic calming device. So you would put them on straightaways or roadways where you'd want some people to keep a consistent speed by putting them in series. They're not typically used to reinforce traffic control.
Okay, not yet. I foresee that coming if it's a stop sign, that people will have to go over them a lot slower than trying to just, blow over them with a light foot, shall we say. Okay, thank you very much.
Apologies, Mr. Chair, for jumping the gun.
That's okay. Move us right along, Rob. I like it. Okay, next we have ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, for the funds from the Norfolk County. This is not a fun topic, but Mr. Coleman is going to lead us in this with Mr.
Liz, thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair. So just by way of background, what was before you is to recommendation to authorize Pam Dukeman to be a creator. The creator is typically the town accountant or the finance director, and to certify myself as a town administrator as a certifier. This is a requirement under the Norfolk County rules and regulations for the releasing of the ARPA funds that were provided by the federal government to Norfolk County, and that will then be passed down to the town of Westwood. This is a more of an administrative matter. Pam, I don't know if you have any additional information that you'd like to share on it.
No, this is just their requirements for us to be able to go onto the portal, submit information to them, get the funds when that occurs, that type of thing. So it's just an administrative setting up our account, say, with the county.
Is the portal open yet?
The portal is open.
Okay.
Yep.
And, okay. All right. I don't have any questions. Robert, John? No? Okay.
I mean, I have one. I know this is sort of an administrative thing, and if I remember right, based on their formula, we're due to get something like 330,000, but we may be due more based on what the federal guidance was, and I'm not particularly comfortable with that. So what's, I guess, Pam or Chris, can you guys elaborate on that? And then I've got a follow-up for Pat.
So, Mr. Gotti, I think what if I'm understanding you correctly, the town was allocated from the federal government to Norfolk County for the town of Westwood. I believe the payment's 3.1 million. The Norfolk County came out with an interpretation of the ARPA regulations that said the town can only use, or excuse me, Norfolk County can only apply $10 million of the 137 that they received for the entire county as what they call revenue loss. And so what they did is they took that $10 million and then they allocated that by population of the census in 2019 for each community that they determined would be eligible for that. From that, for revenue loss, the town has been allocated from Norfolk County 331,000 of that 3.1 million.
And
that itself is one big question that has been continued to be asked since the decision came out last week. So we have a number of, Pam and I are on a listserv with other managers talking about this. There have been some other boards that have been talking about, other select boards that have been talking about this, and trying to get back to Norfolk County to see if there's some additional inquiries that can be made to the federal government for assistance with interpretation, or to help identify to the federal government how Massachusetts counties, at least Norfolk County, is significantly different than other counties in the country and the way they operate.
And so Rob, what that means is the amount that Chris is talking about is kind of unrestricted free money, right? You can spend it on just about anything. It doesn't mean we don't get the rest of the money. It just means it has to be assigned to certain projects and things like that. And the qualifications for those projects is kind of unclear still at this point in time to find out what we can actually use the money for. The interpretation that Chris is talking about and Pam knows about, it's a pretty strict interpretation of the federal regs, and that they haven't been quite defined yet. And this is one law firm. Norfolk County actually hired two, and so there may be a difference of opinion even between the law firms. So it's kind of unclear yet, and that's why Pam and Chris will keep looking into it as the creator and the certifier, figuring out more about this.
Those are their terms, not ours.
No, it's the strangest motion ever.
Yeah.
Sounds very powerful.
Pam, you've been called a lot of things, but I don't think you've been called the creator.
Creator.
So that's where it is, Rob, just so you know. And even at the state level, they're still trying to figure it out, and nobody really has an idea yet. It's going to be the discussion of many seminars in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and so because my understanding is that we have a different calculation of what our revenue loss might have been and what we might have been able to otherwise secure if we were not, if the money were not flowing through the county.
Correct.
Yeah, so we had our audit firm calculate our revenue loss, and our revenue loss exceeded the whole amount we were getting under ARPA, which meant we had a broader use of the funds. And anything we use comes through the select board. You'll be voting on everything on how we might use the ARPA. But we had revenue loss. The final rules came out last week, and in the final rules, they said, you don't need to calculate your revenue loss. Everyone can have up to a flat $10 million. So that was, much larger. That's more than twice what we're getting under ARPA. They came out trying to make it easier for everyone by saying, we'll $10 million. And if you're a big community, you think your revenue loss is greater than that, you can go calculate it. But everyone else, we'll give you a $10 million. So that's terrific news. And it was to help communities. But now, because that money is flowing through Norfolk, and as Chris said, it's not really how counties work in Massachusetts, the money flowing through Norfolk to us, Norfolk is interpreting that to say Norfolk itself can only apply $10 million instead of each community. If that was coming to us and not through Norfolk, we'd have up to the 10 million limit, which was the intent of those rules. So it's a problem, just because some of the specific uses of the money other than under the revenue loss category can be hard for a community like Westwood to fit into. And we would certainly benefit our residents more if we had the broader category to work under.
And just to be clear, the town was never received or was authorized to receive $10 million of opera funds. That's just the federal cap that they put on for the funding.
For what you could have in that category. Yeah.
But it sounds like it would have been a multiple of whatever this very helpful, don't worry about having to do the calculation help that was provided would have been.
It would have been about 10 times more helpful, Rob.
Yeah, that's
yeah. And just, Mr. Chair, and this is one of the reasons why we have not been before you to discuss with you the opera funds and how and different recommendations on how the board may want to apply those funds. We know other communities have done so, but when Pam was looking into this, she said things are still changing, and we know some communities are now scrambling, going a little backtrack on some things that some projects they were looking to use the opera funds for that now they may not be eligible to use them for. So it was a strategic way of trying to make sure that we dotted our I's and crossed our T's before we brought that matter back, and we still have questions even after last week. So.
I don't think they're going to be resolved just because you become the creator and the certifier, but we'll see what we can do.
Okay, I move that the board designate Pamela Dukeman as the quote creator, close quote, and Christopher Coleman as the certifier, both as contacts for the Norfolk County American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds and for access to the ARPA portal.
I will second that.
Okay, Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Gotti.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Welcome to add that to your resume for new titles. Okay, I see that Joan is joining us. We must have a union agreement coming up on the screen. So, hi, Joan.
Hi.
Welcome to join. You're welcome to join us, and we're glad to have you. So,
sorry, I don't have a title. I could be the spender of the ARPA funds.
Yes.
We could all be one of those, Joan. That's not a difficult position.
Yeah, but I called it first.
Okay. So we are here about a memorandum for the United Food and Commercial Workers, also known as our DPW, I guess is where the members are. And so we have a 1-year contract.
We do. This is.
I'm going to recuse myself from this matter, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Hearn. You want me to send, Tricia can send you to a breakout room.
If I can get my mute to work, it'd be good. Go ahead.
Okay.
Don't wait for me.
All right. So anyway, Joan, did you want to go through it? You want me to just read the terms of it? I mean, we have them all. We have all the terms in front of us.
You have the terms in front of you. I'm happy to read them if you'd like. It's very similar to the other 1-year deals that we struck with the other bargaining units that have settled. A lot of sort of housekeeping changes to make the language of the current contract, consistent with our form of government, making, all pronouns gender neutral. Just we've been very consistent across all contracts that we want to, include the language of the personnel policies in the body of the contracts. And then specifically for the DPW, as with all units, a retroactive COLA of 1.5% for fiscal year 22, a one-time performance payment of $500 for each member that was active on 7/1, the addition of June 19th as a holiday in 2022. We have made the stipend for the sewer departments consistent with the rest of the DPW for weekly on-call work. And we made their personal time the way that's administered to be consistent across with the other bargaining units as well.
Okay. I don't really have any questions except that it's February and we'll be back at the table in a couple of months.
Yes, we will, or a couple weeks.
Yes. Okay.
You guys ready for a motion?
Yes.
Okay. I move that the board sign a memorandum of agreement for a one-year contract for the period of July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 1445.
I will second that.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you, Joan, for joining us.
Thank you all.
All right, next, moving along, we have the Westwood Little League Parade on Saturday, April 30th. Westwood Little League would like to host its annual kickoff parade on Saturday, April 30th, beginning at the Hanlon School and finishing at Morrison Field. Format will be the same as in many past years. The children walk from Hanlon to Morrison Park and enjoy the opening day festivities. Parade organizers plan to have the activity set up in the outfield, just like you have in the past, right next to Roach Brothers with cornhole, team pictures, popcorn stations, and of course, the snack shack will be open. Let's see. I think that's about it. It's been vetted through the police department and will be coordinated with the Westwood Police and Fire Departments as well for the parade. It is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. Any questions? Mr. Gotti? No? Mr.
I'm
Hickey?
just happy to see this back on the agenda, quite frankly.
Mr. Chair, there are many people who are excited about this after through the pandemic, not having the parade for the last 2 years. So certainly looking forward to it.
Great. Okay, I move that the board approve the Westwood Little League Parade for Saturday, April 30th, 2022, beginning at 9 a.m., contingent upon final review by Public Safety and Health Departments.
And I will enthusiastically second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Gotti?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. All right, it's scheduled to be back on April 30th. Let's hope for good weather too. All right, moving along under our old business, we have accept two parcels, the former Westwood Lodge property, lots 1 and lot 8. By background, Article 15 of annual town meeting of last year was to accept municipal ownership of a portion of the Westwood Lodge property, known as the soccer field, which is lot 8, and to accept ownership of a portion of the Westwood Lodge property known as lot 1 for the long-term lease of to LifeWorks for the construction and operation of a 5-unit group home for persons with disabilities. I think we all remember this from town meeting. Both of those was Articles 15 and 16 at the request of the planning board, both passed town hall. So I don't have any questions. I think this is just to sign the documents, to authorize Mr. Coleman to sign the documents.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, I move that the board authorize the town administrator to sign all documents necessary for the transfer of the 2 parcels at the former Westwood Lodge property known as Lot 1 and Lot 8 in accordance with the May 3rd, 2021 town meeting vote of Article 15 and Article 16 and the planning board's permit.
I will second that motion.
Hey, Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Gotti?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay, and let's see. Last thing we have on our is the approval of minutes. I did not get to read them today. Tish, can we hold that till our next meeting? Okay. With that, we will be concluding and going into executive session. Select Board will be going into executive session to discuss 3 issues this evening. The first, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A6, which is to discuss strategy with respect to the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. To disclose any further information would have a detrimental effect on the governing body. The second, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A6, to discuss strategy with respect to purchase, exchange, lease of or value of real property for Hale Education, Inc. And the third, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to general collective bargaining for union personnel. All discussions of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if the discussion were held in open session. This board will not be returning to open session this evening. Our next meeting will be on Monday, February 28th, 22, starting at 6:30. It will be via Zoom. And if you happen to see Dan from the Westwood Media Center, make sure you wish him a happy birthday tomorrow. I have a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. We'll see you on February 28th. Enjoy the February school vacation, and we'll see you back after that.